Hey, welcome everyone to our first social studies coffee break. I am Lur.
We're really new at this.
um, so I'm Stacy, and I'm joined today with my colleague Paul Rombo. Both of us work for Learn, which is a non-for-profit organization in Quebec that supports the Anglophone education community. And part of our dossiers at Learn include the RÉCIT Provincial Services for the Anglophone community, which means that we try to nurture students and teachers' digital competency. So the idea really behind these coffee chats is that each week, Paul and I will jump in and share one resource each, one for the elementary level and one for the secondary level. And we'll quickly explain how those resources can help nurture social science competencies as well as digital competencies. And that first part of resource sharing will be recorded. And then after that, we'll stop the recording, as I had said earlier, and then we'll open up the floor for questions or comments or additional resource sharing. So the idea is really to create a community around social sciences. So I do want to mention that today is September 30th, so it is a day of honoring for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And I think it's important today and every day as social science educators that we take the time to reflect and acknowledge the land that we're teaching on, and knowing that regardless of where we're teaching, we are on the territory of one of or more of the 11 nations in Quebec. And then while we're reflecting on the past today, also taking an active role as social science educators and thinking what else we can do to include Indigenous perspectives and views on history throughout our year as educators. So in a bit of that light today, we're going to be sharing two resources to kind of help support educators in bringing Indigenous perspectives and knowledges into their classroom. So I'm going to jump into our first resource. So the first resource is for elementary level for Cycle 3 students. And it is a resource that contains a teacher's guide, student guide, and worksheets around Indigenous tourism, Quebec. This activity was one that I made 2 years ago, I believe, or last year in partnership with Indigenous tourism. And the idea is that students have to look at the Indigenous tourism website and kind of learn about one nation and the communities, that nation's communities. And then the students have to plan a pretend trip or a fictitious trip. It could be a real trip, hopefully, if there was funding for them to go on it as well, to those communities. Okay. And the end project, or the end goal of this activity is where students would make a travel itinerary or a plan or a travel guide showing what they've learned about Indigenous tourism in Quebec today. So this idea behind this LES is that students are looking at the diversity of nations in Quebec as they exist today. So it's a bit less of the history part, but again, looking at the continuity and the differences between the 11 nations of today. So if I click on the link here, if you go to where, it's going to open up a link here to our societies and territories website, which is for the elementary level at Learn. So you can look here, there's a bit of an explanation of the LES activity. And then if you click on the link to the LES folder, right there, that is where you would find the student workbook, the teacher's guide, and some different templates that students could use for the activities. Well, students could use PowerPoint or Google Docs. One of the options, if you go to the last page of the student workbook where you find the templates, here I'm going to do a little bit of scrolling down to the bottom, is actually to do the task in Canva. So if you're familiar with Canva, it is a visual design tool. I'll find the link in there, but I actually have it open in another tab. If you're not familiar with Canva, it is a visual design tool that can be used Teachers across Quebec can apply and get a free educators account with Canva as well. And with that educators account, it gives you access to some of the premium templates and elements that you can add. So here you see this is a template for a student, and with their account, students can go and they could adjust the text. They could add pictures or elements about whatever nation they studied in the LES and activity. So it's a bit of an overview of a resource that can be used at elementary to learn about Indigenous peoples and nations in Quebec. And I will hand it over to Paul, who will have another amazing resource for you for secondary level. And again, if there are any questions about any of these resources, we'll have time after we're done recording. So Paul. Paul, you're still on mute. I don't know. I see you talking.
Okay, great. So I was saying, let's see if the tech works, and it's more like, let's see if I work. Okay, so I'm going to show you a second resource designed for secondary. And again, the idea is that Stacy and I will share a resource each, one for elementary, one for secondary, and then we'll open the room for sharing or questions. And here we go. So I started also with the theme of Indigenous territory. This is a secondary resource. Basically, what it is, it's a document-based learning activity, but it's also a mapping task. So students have to locate traditional Indigenous territories and characterize different nations. And in this way, the goal is to demonstrate how people occupied the territory before Europeans arrive. Um, it's got a Google Doc of containing a worksheet and containing a document collection with the instructions. And it also asks them to use a different tool, which I'll show you in a second, a mapping tool called Cartograph, or you could use Google Maps or Google Earth. Now, the why here is I find that it's really it allows students to classify and interpret documents, but it does them it allows them to use a tool that they appropriate for their own interpretation. So they can place documents in different places on the map, and they own that process. So that's why I really like this tool. It's for secondary 3 students, as I mentioned. Could be for elementary too. This was done by the RÉCIT, a Univers Social, during the COVID period to just start off the program, basically. So where to find it? So what you would do is you can go to the Learn site. So if you went to the Learn site, educators.learnquebec.ca, and you searched Indigenous, you would find it as a resource, and you would click and open the resource. But the main way I'm hoping people will find it is by using our secondary history site, which divides up the program into several time periods. And this particular document is right at the beginning in a section on on Indigenous territory, and after talking briefly about migration theories. But I also wanted to show you that these types of activities are also found at the bottom of the time period section. So I'm going to access it here, and it would be down here, Indigenous territory before the arrival of the Europeans. So that's where it is. This is what it would look like. I have it open here. Basically, it's a typical learning task that contains a worksheet and documents where the students are asked to locate boundaries of Iroquois and Algonquin territory, and to learn about their way of life, and to map that information on some kind of a map. So this is what the collection looks like. It's got a map that they can use if they want to work right in Google, and there's a larger version, this would be more for paperwork. It's got tables where we can note things about different territories in general, note things about the different way of life of Algonquins and Iroquoians, note things about what was traded at the time before Europeans arrived, which is quite an interesting document down below. And for each document, they record which document they got that information from and fill in the table. The documents look like this. There's one on migration theory, We're Current Way of Life. This is the one I was talking about trade routes, and so on. So the idea is they learn about these different Indigenous peoples, and they put this information on a map. First the territory, and then the actual individual settlements that they've researched or they've found as examples of those. If you go to the actual page that it's on, the page for Indigenous territory, there is actually a right here, sort of a one that's been started. And you click that and it looks like this. So this is one that's been started that students or teachers can sort of use as a base. They don't have to. They can use a blank map and you can add. So this is Cartograph, the tool I wanted to highlight today. Basically you can do zones, so you can outline territory, you can add points on maps, and in those points you can add information. So the students will be able to delineate the territory, but also add the information they want on the map. And that's Cartograph the tool. If you go home, there's also information about the tool, and there's a help section which allows you to learn how to create a map, how to draw lines and shapes, and how to add points to content, which is very short 1-minute videos. And this is actually very popular amongst even elementary students. So it's something that's very accessible with this type of technology. So that is my share. And that's it for the recording session. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave this up. So,
Perfect.
hello.
So I'm gonna stop the recording.
Yes. So that was our official beginning to our coffee break